Hello, and welcome to our webinar entitled Certainty in Quinoa, sponsored by Ardent Mills. I am Jamie Emanuel, Marketing Manager for Ardent Mills, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Today we are excited to introduce Ardent Mills Great Plains Quinoa. As Ardent Mills, the premier flour milling and ingredient company, we will bring transparency, groundbreaking scale, and consistent quality needed to support the mainstream growth of quinoa with consumers, food manufacturers, bakeries, retailers, and restaurants in the U.S. and Canada. Today we're going to be reviewing the quinoa trends and the new insights into the value proposition for quinoa. Then we will discuss the story of Great Plains quinoa, including our farmer network and growing regions, followed by an overview of the product attributes so you can really understand how different quinoa formats work in application. And last, we will end with a question and answer session. And today, I'm really excited to introduce to you our experienced panel of speakers. Dave Shaluga is the Director of Consumer Insights for Ardent Mills. Prior to joining Ardent Mills, David had been Director of Consumer Insights for the Commercial Foods Division of ConAgra Foods in Omaha, Nebraska. And he also has his PhD in Consumer Psychology from Purdue University. Shireen White is the Director of Specialty Grains and Risk, also with Ardent Mills. Her career started trading wheat for various flour mills for over 23 years. And in her current role, she is responsible for working directly with producers to help Ardent Mills expand their presence in the specialty space, which includes the hard white wheat, organic, barley, gluten-free, and sprouted grains and flours. And last but not least is Laurie Scalen, R&D Manager for Ardent Mills. Laurie holds a doctorate in food science and human nutrition from Colorado State University with a research emphasis on cereals and ancient grains. She is also an adjunct professor at CSU and principal inventor of a U.S. patent on quinoa ingredients through the CSU Research Foundation. Dr. Scalen is co-editor of a 2016 publication titled Sustainable Protein Sources, which is a book collaboration between over 50 food and agricultural scientists from industry, government, and academia. And with that, I will pass it off to David Shaluga, who will kick it off for us. Dave.
Thank you, Jamie. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I will review some marketplace and consumer trends about quinoa. You are looking at the past 5-year sales of retail products that use quinoa as an ingredient. This is based on Nielsen Scantrack sales data. Products are included if the word quinoa is highlighted on the front, back, or sides of a package. If quinoa is only mentioned in the ingredient list, it is not included. Starting at the left, you can see that retail sales for products using quinoa as an ingredient were just under $70 million in 2012. Sales increased rapidly each year since 2012, and as of 2016, total U.S. sales reached over $550 million. Average annual growth is a staggering 72%. Sales growth has begun to slow. 2016 saw growth of 23% compared to the long-term average of 72%, and it is normal to have decelerating growth over a long time span. Prices for retail products have begun to moderate, that is, to move toward the prices of mainstream products. On the left, you see that products made with quinoa were nearly $4 per package in 2012. These were premium-priced products, often found in the specialty foods section of the store. By 2016, average selling price has dropped to around $3.50 per package. There was a significant price drop in 2016 as growth in snack bars, pasta, side dishes, and boxed quinoa contributed to lower selling prices. On this slide, you are looking at the major product categories contributing to quinoa retail sales. Shown in the blue boxes are the 2016 retail sales dollars. In the lower left are snack bars made with quinoa, the largest category in terms of dollar sales. They had 2016 sales of nearly $114 million. One thing to note is that often quinoa is a minor ingredient in a snack bar. Thus, there may not be as much quinoa ingredient volume here compared to other categories. In the upper left are boxed and bagged quinoa. These are full 1 pound or more packages of quinoa that's cooked at home. These account for nearly $80 million in 2016 sales. Finally, in the lower right is the third largest retail category using quinoa as an ingredient, breakfast cereals. Breakfast cereals had nearly $70 million in sales in 2016. The categories on the prior slide, plus a couple more smaller ones, account for 82% of the $550 million in retail sales in 2016. Several other small categories make up the remaining share of quinoa products. On this slide, you are looking at the long-term trend in curiosity and interest in quinoa. The trend goes from 2008 to 2017. The information comes from Google Trends and is based on the number of searches for quinoa. As you can see, there was a steady rise in curiosity and interest in quinoa from about 2010 to 2013. This is shown as the blue line. From a peak in 2013, curiosity has dropped about 30% in 2017. We show Google searches for paleo diet as a comparison. This is the red line. Notice it follows the same pattern. However, interest in quinoa always outpaces the topic of paleo diet. The fall-offs for quinoa and paleo diet since 2013 seem to be widespread across many food topics. We've seen others peaking in 2013 and falling ever since. Some of you might have noticed the pattern of spikes in interest. These are normal and always occur in January when consumers make New Year resolutions. Google searches for quinoa in 2017 are strongest in trendy West Coast cities like Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and trendy East Coast cities, New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C., and various state capitals, Denver, Austin, St. Paul, Hartford, Columbus. These cities have led the way since 2008. The pattern on the map has been very similar in the past 8 years. It's very normal that these trendy cities have the strongest searches for quinoa. Most trendy food topics are searched in these cities. In general, Internet conversations and information about quinoa are centered on quinoa salad or quinoa side dishes. For example, consumers want to know recipes for quinoa salad, or they talk about the quinoa salad they ate at a restaurant. Quinoa is featured on 20% of fast casual menus. Think Panera Bread, for example. And quinoa is featured on just 15% of fine dining menus, with plenty of room for future growth. Some of the specialized work we do is called Internet Analytics. This is where the entirety of all news, blogs, social media on the Internet related to quinoa is analyzed. We look for narratives and themes. Overall, the sentiment on the Internet toward quinoa is very positive. Consumers and news stories are positive in their tone as they describe food experiences with quinoa or its nutrition benefits. There is a small amount of negative sentiment, just 10% of Internet information. And on the right side, you see some of the negative narrative around quinoa. The central theme that we exposed in this analysis was one of quinoa representing elite or pretentious people. Feeding into this story are sub-themes about quinoa being an indulgence, or being imported, or hurting native farmers, or traveling too many food miles. We are watching these sub-themes. Even though small for now, there could be a future rise in negativism toward imported products, products from south of our U.S. borders, and products for the social elite, and that could possibly affect quinoa. Just for fun, we did a survey in January among U.S. adults age 18 to 70. We asked them, how do you pronounce quinoa? And we gave a short list of phonetic spellings. We found that only 53% of these adults correctly picked quinoa, and you see it spelled there above the chart, from the list. This means that slightly less than half of adults don't know how to pronounce it. This could continue to make quinoa a target for late-night talk show hosts and beer commercials. What we found interesting was that people in rural areas and low-income consumers were pretty near the overall average. These are shown at the right of the chart. Also interesting was the correct pronunciation among our elite consumers, those who visit all the trendy food stores and restaurants, and those who have enlightened consumption habits, grew to the 60% range. Now, I would have expected 80% or more correct pronunciation among these more elite segments. Consumer perceptions of quinoa eaters are quite positive. Our total sample of adults viewed them as healthy, educated foodies who do yoga. Interestingly, there was no stigma among the rural or low-income consumers in the survey. They also viewed quinoa eaters in the same positive way. In fact, no matter what consumer segment we looked at in the survey, all had the same positive image of quinoa eaters. This is good news and shows that the internet narrative of elitism is still relatively quiet and hasn't affected consumer perceptions. I'll summarize some of the points I've made here. Number one, sales trend has been very positive. 2, the prices are moving toward the mainstream. 3, there's only 11 categories that are driving most of the sales. 4, quinoa for salads and side dishes is the most prominent. 5, there's still a lot of curiosity and interest on the internet as seen by Google Trends, but we are having some downward drift since 2013. Internet narratives are very positive. The only possibility for criticism might be that quinoa is considered elite, and there might be some backlash toward imported products as we move into the future. And with that, I'll pass it over to Shreen.
Thanks, David. I'm excited to be here to talk about our farmer network today. Ardent Mills is contract growing over 300,000 IP acres with family farms in 14 states in the United States. These acres include hard white winter and hard white spring wheats, organic wheat, soft white wheat, barley, and heritage grains. We're excited to welcome the Great Plains quinoa farmers into our grower network of family farms. Each farmer and growing location is carefully vetted before entering into the quinoa growing program. Crop rotation is considered, and due to the seed size and its gluten-free status, quinoa should not follow a rotation of canola or wheat. Location is also important. Quinoa is very sensitive to hot, dry, windy conditions, and past use of herbicides are also taken into consideration. As a farmer starts his quinoa program, he usually starts small, planting on about 50 acres. Once it is determined that the quinoa works in their rotation plans and that their land is suitable, farmers will add quinoa to their future field plantings. The largest farmer in the program today is planting about 1,200 acres of quinoa. Currently, there are 105 farmers in the growing program. Spring applications are being accepted now, and we expect the grower network to double in 2017. This is a quick look at our Great Plains quinoa growing areas, and Great Plains farmers grow a very special variety that is backed by 20-plus years of breeding expertise. The quinoa being planted is best suited for the northern plains of Canada. Quinoa is a very sensitive plant and its growing conditions. The cool and dry climates of Alberta and northern Saskatchewan are ideal growing conditions for North American quinoa. Farms located more than 50 miles south of the Yellowhead Highway, or Highway 16, are not accepted into the program. The hot, windy weather south of this highway puts the quinoa plant at risk for head blast sterilization. Ardent Mills is excited about what our Great Plains quinoa brings to the table. We see opportunities that include agronomic benefits, crop diversity, traceability, and supply assurance. While we know all farms are not best suited for no-till or minimum till, but these types of farming practices do work best for quinoa. 80% of the farmers in the Great Plains quinoa growing program are using no-till or minimum till practices. We see increased water retention in the soil, and the crop residue left behind helps to reduce soil erosion versus conventional tillage. Planting into the stubble also helps protect the young quinoa plant from the wind as it is maturing. Quinoa is giving the Great Plains farmer a third crop rotation, which is good for the soil and helps the farmer diversify his growing portfolio. Not only is Great Plains quinoa growing in North America, but each of the farmers, we can trace each of the farmer lots right back to the farm. This gives a great opportunity for traceability that the consumer is looking for. Great Plains quinoa comes with supply assurance. The grower networks continue to increase. We have 20 years of breeding expertise, and as the farmers become more experienced quinoa producers, we see year-on-year yield increases. Ardent Mills is proud of the relationships we have developed with family farms across the country. Every day, 100 million people in the U.S. eat foods made with our ingredients. Our family farms are vital to our business. We want them to succeed, and we are excited to welcome the Great Plains quinoa farmers into the family. And now I will turn it over to Laurie.
Thank you, Shreen. I'm very pleased to be here to discuss the unique product attributes that are specific to the Great Plains quinoa. Great Plains quinoa has unique attributes, which I will cover in this section, that have application in a variety of foods, from breakfast cereals to baked goods to prepared foods. The variety of Great Plains quinoa is unique to North America, and its attributes are reflective of this varietal difference. As a product developer, quinoa is used in many foods because of its versatility. It may stand alone as a whole grain food, or it can be added gram by gram to increase levels of whole grain per serving in nutritious foods that are low in saturated fat, have zero cholesterol, and provide dietary sources of fiber. It is also ideal in today's movement towards plant-forward diets or plant-based foods that are specifically designed to support overall health. Great Plains quinoa is non-GMO. It has been bred for its attributes using traditional breeding practices. It is also suitable in today's need for clean label and simply prepared foods. Quinoa, of course, is gluten-free, and our whole grain seeds undergo a multi-stage cleaning process that is in a dedicated gluten-free facility in the U.S. Ardent Mills quinoa ingredients include whole grain seed, whole grain flour, whole grain flakes, and toasted crisps for the versatility needed in your product development. We also have a breadth of custom capabilities to meet your specific needs for multi-grain and seed blends, rice and tricolored quinoa blends that incorporate red and black quinoa. We have an existing selection of bakery mixes and also the capability to make a large variety of custom and proprietary bakery and pizza mixes. With today's interest in clean label, it is important for chefs and product developers to find simple, native ingredients that also have functional properties that are needed in consumer packaged goods or food service foods. Great Plains quinoa attributes include whole grain, gluten-free, non-GMO, as mentioned, also a cream to tan color. Hunter colorimeter scores show darker L values and redder A values compared to that of traditional quinoa, which is indicative of its pigments in the outer seed coat. It is also a small seed, equivalent to other small seed quinoa types that are 30% smaller than large quinoa seed varieties. One advantage of the smaller seed is on a pound per pound basis, there is a 30% greater number of visible seeds or greater seed coverage for use in toppings or dispersed within a food for nice visuals. Quinoa, the starch type, has an impact on texture and mouthfeel. Plant-based starch is typically made of 70% amylopectin, which is a branched chain polymer of glucose, and 30% amylose, which is a linear chain polymer of glucose. Varying degrees of these two types equate to key functional differences in starchy foods and in food applications. The Great Plains quinoa has a high level of amylopectin, around 94%, which is considered a waxy starch and is different than traditional quinoa varieties. Due to the high amylopectin level in the Great Plains quinoa, the whole seeds stay intact during normal cooking, maintaining texture and shape, contributing to a firmer texture and mouthfeel. In addition, in kettle cooking and prepared foods such as soups, this quality of maintaining shape is beneficial over seeds with lower levels of amylopectin that tend to disintegrate. A similar analogy is the difference observed between boiling potatoes or medium grain rice, both high in amylopectin, that maintain shape during cooking and have either a smooth or sticky or creamy texture, as compared to baking type potatoes or long grain rice with low level of amylopectin that have a mealy or fluffy texture. So foods with high level of amylopectin, such as our Great Plains quinoa, have a reduced tendency for retrogradation upon cooling and storage, and also offer freeze-thaw stability. For these reasons, the Great Plains quinoa has benefits as a thickener and stabilizer and in frozen foods. High amylopectin is also an important factor in extrusion as it increases expansion, which contributes to lower density and lighter texture in snack foods. The high amylopectin in Great Plains whole seed quinoa lends itself to foods requiring freeze-thaw and cooking stability, such as IQF, frozen foods, prepared meals, and side dishes. In food service and culinary applications, from our work, we determined two types of cooking methods, what we call a pasta and a pilaf-style cooking. In a pasta-style method, in which the water is drained, the quinoa seeds remain singular, which can be an added benefit in IQF preparations that are made to scoop out easily or maintain a free flow while still frozen. In a pilaf-style method, on the other hand, the seeds are cooked similar to rice, and the finished texture can be that of sticky rice or risotto. In the pilaf style, the sticky texture offers a natural binding property that is useful in preparing veggie patties or plant-based appetizers. Not all quinoa varieties are suitable for extrusion or puffing, and some types actually lose their brand during popping of the seed itself, which reduces the nutritional qualities. The high amylopectin levels in our Great Plains quinoa is well suited for popping and extrusion to make our crisps. Our quinoa crisps are puffed to double in size and are then lightly toasted for flavor, golden color, and crisp-like texture. The bran stays intact and maintains its whole grain nutrition. The increase in seed size, reduction in density, and light texture of our crisp is ideal for yogurt and salad toppings, bars, confectionaries such as chocolates and caramels that offer textural as well as visual appeal, and in breakfast cereals. In third-party testing, Great Plains quinoa flour has shown the ability to foam and produce stable foams over traditional quinoa flour. Foaming entraps air and in matrices to provide textural qualities in cakes and breads, as well as in non-bakery foods. In pasta, inclusion of 10% quinoa flour has shown to reduce checking or cracking during drying, and in tortillas can provide a soft texture. Quinoa flour is suitable in extruded snacks, again due to high amylopectin levels, which give the ability to expand. In addition, a low level of amylose aids in a crispy attribute required in extrusion. Quinoa flour can be used as a thickener and roux alternative to wheat flour. Quinoa flakes are ideally suited to breakfast and hot cereals. The custom blends and mixes previously discussed are also available in a wide variety of packaging to meet your needs. We offer bulk totes, 50 and 25-pound bags, as well as small packs, 8 ounces up to 25 pounds. Ardent Mills Safeguard System may be considered on your custom quinoa ingredients. Our Safeguard treatment and delivery system is a state-of-the-art process that extends food safety assurance from our plant to yours. This concludes the section on product attributes. Our R&D and culinary teams are continuing to seek new culinary uses and product application, and we welcome partnering with you to meet your needs in either a retail product or food service. Now I'll hand it over to Jamie for Q&A.
Thank you, Dave, Shereen, and Laurie, for your insightful presentation and added knowledge into Ardent Mills Great Plains quinoa, how it can add consumer appeal, tell a North American story, and how it really can be used in application. Now we will open it up for questions. Okay, we've received a few questions on growing of quinoa, so we will start with what is the typical crop rotation for quinoa, and what is the North American growing season compared to the South American growing season? Shereen, I'll pass that to you.
Thanks, Jamie. When you look at the typical crop rotation for our quinoa farmers, the number one crop rotation would be to have quinoa follow a gluten-free crop like peas or soybeans. Number two crop would be barley, and we look at barley because it's easy to separate from the quinoa, and then obviously number three would be wheat due to the gluten factor in wheat. So when we look to put new farmers into the program, we always look at what they had in their field last on rotation, and a farmer is going to get priority if he was a gluten-free farmer, so peas and soybeans. And then as far as the growing season, South American quinoa is usually harvested in April or May. And if you look at the growing season for our Great Plains quinoa, they usually start to plant early May, and hopefully they're done by early June. And then when you get into end of July, first part of August, you'll see that's when the quinoa is flowering. And then normal harvest would be mid to late September, sometimes early October if you've got some weather issues.
Thanks, Shereen. We have a question regarding the retail products growth for quinoa. Did a certain category of products, including quinoa, grow more than others? And I'll pass that to Dave.
Sure. 4 categories are driving that growth. There's the snack bars, crispy, crunchy snack chips, crackers, and ready-to-eat breakfast cereal. All of those are growing at roughly 50% in dollar sales compared to a year ago. Crackers is actually growing above that. It's primarily driven by a small core group of manufacturers who have devoted interest on quinoa-related products. You can see a pattern there. They're crunchy, they're savory. Quinoa goes well with the other types of ingredients that are in those types of products. Jamie?
How do these kind of products, how are they changing in restaurants and food service menus? And I think, Laurie, you have a point of view there.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. So quinoa was introduced over a decade ago in a couple restaurants by chefs that really were on the forefront of introducing new foods. And now you can see it, of course, quinoa on the menus of multi-unit restaurant chains. So from a culinary and R&D perspective, quinoa has been an intriguing item to add to menus as an alternative to staples like rice or potatoes, to add flavor, texture, and whole grain nutrition, as well as being easy to cook and versatile in a lot of recipes. On the marketing side, though, it also comes with an interesting story of the grower or history. Quinoa has led the interest in ancient grains, so that's really some of the reasons why it continues to change menus.
Thank you, Laurie. Laurie, I will follow up with you. A question, which is the best way of working with quinoa flour compared to wheat flour?
So that is kind of a difficult question. Quinoa flour, of course, does not have gluten, so it doesn't have that viscoelastic gluten property that functions so well in traditional bakery goods. And so with mixes, for example, you can successfully replace wheat flour with 10 to up to 30% quinoa flour, and it depends on what type of bakery mix you actually have. But in high scale, large volume bakeries where you need that high level of functional performance, we've seen that only a 10% replacement is appropriate. It's about the same water absorption typically, but you do have to include, for the most part, vital wheat gluten to make up for the gluten-free nature of quinoa.
Thank you, Laurie. Shireen, we have a couple questions for you. Do any of your farmers use a no-till method of growing?
Thanks, Jamie. Yes, about 80% of the quinoa farmers today are using no-till or minimum till. We know that doesn't work for everyone, but we have found that this is the best practice for quinoa. Planting right into the stubble helps protect the quinoa plant as it's growing, and it protects it from the wind. We're also seeing that planting no-till helps to conserve water and helps with soil conservation.
And just to follow up to that, Shireen, do you see or do you foresee any other small grains being produced more locally here in the States?
I hope so. We kind of look at our specialty space as a nearby project and then also kind of a 3 or 5 year or a long-term project. So we're always looking at new opportunities. Some of them are things that we can jump into right away, and some of the things take longer where we're maybe having to find new varieties of wheats or barleys or quinoa, find new farmers and new growing areas. So we're always looking for new cool things that we can participate in. Some of those happen right away, and some of them are longer term.
Dave, why do you think the snack bar and granola category include more quinoa and has such a large volume of total sales?
The short answer is a couple of major manufacturers in that sector have gotten behind it, and they're pushing the sales. But in a broader sense, snack bars in general are popular, and they're growing. And then thirdly, the flavor and texture of quinoa goes very well with the other ingredients that are in snack bars, such as nuts and seeds. Jamie?
Thanks, Dave. We are getting a lot of great questions. Laurie, I'll give this one to you. What is the taste and the flavor of our quinoa seed with Great Plains quinoa?
So the quinoa is, I would describe it as mild. It can be used in a variety of different recipes. It may have a nutty characteristic. I personally think it has a little bit of a savoriness to it, which kind of complements the firmer texture. And so yeah, I think we're still continuing to assess the flavors with third parties and working on more scientific approach to the sensory characteristics.
Thank you, Laurie. Shireen, I'm going to give it back to you. There are a couple more questions about future plans. Specifically, are there future plans to make the quinoa seed viable to be grown across other provinces or in the United States? and if there are any organic offerings to be available in the future.
Yeah, so like I said before, we're always looking for new projects, and some of those are long-term, some of those are near-term. We are looking at new varieties that would be well adapted for growing areas in the United States, and along with that, we are looking to expand our organic portfolio. So today it includes just organic wheat and flour, but we would love to incorporate organic quinoa into that family. So we are looking for opportunities to get a few acres in this spring, and we'll see how that develops.
Thank you, Shireen. Dave, I will ask you this question. Do you see a significant growth opportunity in the industrial sales space?
I'm not sure the term industrial sales, if that means commercial or B2B, but certainly yes. In the retail space, we saw that 72% year-over-year growth in the past 5 years, and we assume that there's going to be continued expansion, particularly as we get into more mainstream products, real food for real people. We're still not done yet with the growth in quinoa.
Which is always good news. We love quinoa. Laurie, I will ask you this question. We received one about the cooking process. Do your cooked and processed products bring in the soapy flavor often associated with unrinsed or raw quinoa?
Thank you. Yes, so we definitely consider that. What this question is speaking to is the level of saponins that are inherent to quinoa seed. And we absolutely go through a multi-stage cleaning to remove, using water to remove the saponins from the seed to a level with our quality assurance program to where we remove them and meet our standards. So that's something inherent to quinoa in South America as well as in North America, and definitely part of our quality assurance program.
Great. We have received a few questions about other products outside of quinoa, one in which do you see quinoa growth slowing down as a result to the increased offerings, as well as other ancient grains like millet, sorghum, and teff, and will we be working with these grains in the future?
I'll try to answer the first part of that question, and perhaps Shireen, you may have some thoughts on the second part of the question. No, it's not going to slow down. The group of ancient grains are growing as a whole. The other grains are still further behind quinoa in the race, but they're not going to cut into the growth of quinoa.
Just a follow-up to that question, Jamie, we do offer those other grains today through one of our co-manufacturers. So as we look to grow at Ardent and understand the space a little bit better, I think it is something that we definitely want to look at and see if we can start to produce some of those gluten-free products as well.
Laurie, this will be a good question for you. How does the whole seed quinoa cooking time compare to rice cooking times for quinoa rice blends, as an example?
Okay, so quinoa cooks very quickly in about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on your altitude, and which is similar to white rice. They cook very well together. That's the experience. It's much shorter cooking time to that of brown rice. So if you are wanting to add quinoa into a brown rice blend, you'd want to add it to midway into the cooking point. So that's one approach that you could do to balance that.
Another follow-up question for you, Laurie. Has there been any research on extruding quinoa for plant-based meat?
Interesting question. So extruding quinoa for plant-based meat is quite different than what I mentioned, extruding for snacks. in which the starch is the functional component. In a plant-based meat, which is also sometimes called a meat analog, where it's traditionally made using a textured soy protein or wheat gluten called seitan. And in that case, the functional component is the protein, in which the protein itself is extruded into meat-like fibers that provide a chewy meat type of a texture. And soy and wheat perform very well in this type of food, and it comes down to the protein type. So when you look at the traditional Osborne classification, which is protein based on solubility, the soy has a globulin protein, and the wheat has glutenin and gliadin, and those, like I said, extrude very well into fibers. Well, does quinoa, does it have this type of ability? I'm not sure entirely. Quinoa is mainly albumin. It does have some globulins in it, so it is an area for future investigation. What I do know from past research is that quinoa protein concentrate, being mostly albumin globulin, does have a creamy, nice creamy texture, but whether it can extrude into meat-like fibers is to be determined. I can tell you, though, that just cooking the whole grain, we've been able to replace ground beef with whole quinoa, cooked quinoa, in about a 30-70 ratio. That's 30% taking the ground beef out, replacing it with 30% cooked quinoa, when you use a pilaf style in which the amylopectin comes out and really contributes to a binding of that patty. So that's all I know on that topic.
A few more questions on the seed varieties here, so I'm going to pass this to Shireen. Does this program use the same seed varieties that have been used in South America, or have we developed new varieties that work better in this particular environment?
Thanks, Jamie. We are looking at new varieties that are better suited for the climate up in Canada. I know that the variety that we've been working with now has been worked with over the last 20 years and has been developed for the specific climate and conditions in Canada where we've got it planted. We're also looking at new varieties and working on new things coming out that will be available here over the next few years that we can try in the U.S. So we're excited to see what those new varieties bring to us.
Couple application questions here. What is the best variety for extrusion with our quinoa formats?
Okay, this again is a question pertaining to the starch and its functional as a functional component in extrusion for snack type of foods. And as mentioned earlier, our quinoa is very different in this case, where it is a waxy type or high amylopectin. It's actually around 94% amylopectin. Anything above 90 is waxy and appropriate for extrusion. Anything lower than that, which is your traditional quinoa, is not a waxy type.
Another follow-up to that for you, Laurie, in terms of applications. Does quinoa work well for most rice and pasta recipes? And are there any recipes that it does not work well in?
Oh, wow. I could probably talk for a while on this one, but basically, for most rice and pasta recipes, if you're just substituting, and I believe this question is pertaining to the typical savory pilaf-style recipes, quinoa works very well in sauce dishes and cold dishes as well. I think any recipes it may not work well in really could come down to standing completely alone in the recipe. I think maybe you'd want to consider a multi-grain blend with quinoa as an inclusion that it may not be able to stand by itself in. And please feel free to reach out to myself or my culinary team. We love to help partner with you on these type of specific recipes.
We've also had a few questions around the Farmer and Grower Network, which is really exciting because we're very proud to work with our farmers. Shireen, I'm going to give this one to you. As the Farmer and Grower Network doubles in the next year, what support are we providing to those first-time or new quinoa growers?
So we have agronomists on the ground in Canada that will be working with all of the quinoa growers. We typically start them out small, around 50 acres, just so they can try it, make sure that their growing area is comparable to what the quinoa plant needs, make sure that the soil is going to work for what the quinoa plant needs, make sure the rotation is what it needs to be. So we really don't encourage them to go big in quinoa until they've had an opportunity to work with it for a couple of years and make sure that they understand all the nuances of the quinoa plant and how to grow the quinoa. But we do have, like I said, agronomists on the ground that will go up. They'll visit with the farmer. They visit the farms. They make sure that everything is in place and doing, as it should. So they're there to help support and answer any questions that our farmers have.
Shireen, one more question for you, and then I think we have a couple more. We have time for a couple more. Will the prices of the quinoa growth or the incline of quinoa, will it increase or decrease in the next 5 years?
Oh my goodness, I wish I had a crystal ball to answer that question. We can't control commodity prices, but one thing I think is unique with our quinoa program is that we do offer long-term contracts to our customers, and that just helps stabilize that price, and they're able to make their plans for a longer amount of time, and they understand what their ingredient costs are going to be, and we think that this is a great option for them, and hopefully they see this as a benefit as they're making plans into the future.
Okay, we have time for one last question. I'm going to combine a couple into the same one. Laurie, I'll direct this to you. What is the best application for quinoa flakes? And then separately, is there any market for malted quinoa in beer?
Oh, thank you, Jamie. So quinoa flakes, we've seen one of the best applications is hot cereals, and we're continuing to look at other applications such as topicals for bakery products, breads and muffins. I think that there's just a lot of room for learning more about the quinoa flakes, for one, and figuring out additional applications. For the malted quinoa in beer, I've actually personally malted quinoa myself for this type of product, and quinoa functions very well as an adjunct. Believe it or not, and a flavor adjunct. I found that it has, it can have a apricot type of a flavor once it's malted and used in a fermented beverage. Quinoa is used in vodkas already, but the beer, I think, where the market will go, I'm not sure, but it definitely has some interest right now.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you for all the questions to our audience. That concludes the question and answer session. For those questions that we did not have time to answer, we will try to get back to you via email and follow-up. Please be aware also that this webinar will be available on demand for the next 3 months, so we definitely encourage you to share with your team and view at another date if needed. And in addition, we do have a few handouts that are available for download. You will see a download button at the bottom of the screen, which is actually 3 buttons from the left. And a very special thank you again to our speakers, David, Shireen, and Laurie. Some great information about how Ardent Mills Great Plains quinoa can be of great use to our customers out there today. We really look forward to working with all of you, and we thank you to all of our viewers for your time and engagement.